Probably you'd be more interested in watching Michael Reagan and Zappa. The video I made the same day I made this one, right before. But on the off chance that somebody's interested in the truth that you're supposed to wish wasn't the truth, which I think provides the best answer to the con job that Michael Reagan and Zappa pulled with Ringo Starr, George Harrison, Maduri Goto, and Paul McCartney way back when. I think this tape will satisfy your desire to know what the truth you're supposed to wish wasn't the truth is. Um, in 1984 or so, when my dad died, I was aware that there were some strange things that had happened to me as a child. I was in a state of amnesia from a neurological clot in my brain. But dad died, and the AIDS stuff really, I was offended on behalf of the gay community. Now, of course, if you want to know why the gay community sided with um, Reagan, you need to watch Michael Reagan and Zappa. But um, I was appalled by the things that Patrick Buchanan was saying about the gay community. I'm not historically a member of the gay community. I was abused as a child, and hiding that fact may have played a major role in what they did. They angled towards even making a pet of Asian pornography of the Hun who really tore my head off as a child. He'd give me a head dog and say, squeeze your head so hard your nose will pop off. And I drew drawings in amnesia and sent them to Tim Meadows at the Pittsburgh Post Gazette. The idea that Gail Burson had something to do with what had done to me seemed remote, the far from the screen. I mean, they were baby letters. And when I was reading, collecting autographs, it was like my autograph book from grade school. She seemed to be what was dislocated when I was attacked, was the upwardly mobile sense of an honors department student. But I was deaf and I had to accept being deaf. So the idea that I could have saved young men. Now, people who know me know that I've researched it, come up with the evidence that it was a major scam by Zappa and Reagan. But you don't want to go there because it empowers Reagan and Zappa and makes what they did look legitimate. What I'm trying to do is show the illegitimacy of it from a more normative standpoint. I was a hard-working library clerk who was deaf. I was full-time. I just lost my father, so I was certainly grieving. He was an irreplaceable person, and most people who knew him regarded him as an asset. The people who were jumping up and down with human interest in inheriting me, of course, talk sideways about him a great deal, and I won't mention the obituaries graffiti, since that plays into the outer limits aspect of what really happened. I'm not talking about the outer limits aspect of what really happened. I'm not trying to factually contest Hollywood jurisdiction in this essay. This essay is about what was really going on, the things that you're supposed to wish weren't. I was raising issues of vivisection of Central America in the Pit News. And I was raising issues of free speech as something that I thought that the artists who I liked believed in. And I was challenging people to wake up about ending hunger, about the possibilities of expanding the medical database to Africa. especially in light of the emergency situation. I talked to Dr. Robert Glue about that, and John Seitz, um, Enterprise and Planetary New Guinea Peace Corps' architect of ecologically integrated buildings. And I wrote Buckminster Fuller, and I talked a good deal about the structural mentality that led to a status quo that was divorced from even willingness to do lip service to ecological sustainability and change. So there was a lot happening that needed to be engaged. I wasn't able to go to school. And of course, Zappa was lampooning Reagan's attitude about AIDS. And even though it was encouraging people to put themselves at risk, and I found that strange, at the same time, it did occur to me that if you play into the perception of reckless behavior through consensual involvement with a legitimate, willing partner, the Peeping Toms might actually be police forces on special assignment who were behind the AIDS attack. In other words, a sort of Gestapo of leering and sniveling come raping in the manner of loping that the cinema team in Yoko Ono's film Rape stalked and loped after someone. And sure enough, they set up a Venus flytrap on Mount Desert Island and then claimed it was just fucking with me so they could make off with the payola that they licky chops with John Schulman by appropriating a book they'd sent me as a child and written, which was the script of Gail Burson, who is still at large. And this is the truth you wish is not the truth, not because of those facts, but because it means that their claim I could have saved John Lennon is fulfilled so that the people who were appropriating the storyline get away with it. And as insurance, they use this nightmare as a special event of the Beatles to promote the superiority of AIDS victims over the deaf victim who could have saved John Lennon. And they denied I was a victim and said, we will pit your suffering against the suffering of an AIDS victim in a Fountain of Salmacis routine. And they hired Amanda Harcourt to do this. Amanda Harcourt was saying things like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts in 1984 when this began. Sarcastically saying it must be the treason of succulent machines. Thing was all scientifically a game to tell its story, to establish a narrative. We were just fucking with him, she said through her agency. So rather than intervene and warn people and save lives, they lied about the whole thing and took the ball and ran with it and claimed that it's an equity jurisdiction in which the individual rights of the victim are subordinated because he is now the accused. And they continue to bang on with petty allegations that were put into the script of interrogation for the very purpose that they were ridiculing, moral cleanse. So they moral cleanse after ridiculing moral cleanse. What could that purpose be? Because they were trying to incite people into self-destruction. So all of these Seattle crazies who were incited into self-destruction have now formed a Gestapo, a Union Legion, in which you must um, join hands in equity through disturbing forms of disease transmission. And this is where the poison in the mouth and the COVID-19 molecule came from, was this mentality that they were establishing equity on behalf of the AIDS victims by poisoning everybody. And nobody should think they're better than that. Everybody should join hands and accept the jurisdiction of sacrifice in return for moral favor. And where this comes from isn't just the Russian Orthodox Church. It comes from the Christian missionary scene in Noam Chomsky, whose plague on both your houses mentality is clear and evident. But most of all, it comes from the narcoleptic hangover of Seattle's Cornell West spinner beanie brainies who can't, for some reason, de-pervert themselves from the idea of molesting a deaf child. It's an obsession with them. Moon Unit Zappa is driven to chewing the carpet, bare, ravaging the carpet, must molest the deaf child. And behind it is Yoko Ono. So, what evidence is there that Yoko Ono had it in for my father because he was the naval officer? It's not clear what happened to my father, except that he was murdered. How much he knew about what the Empire was doing is a matter of interest and question. Was he killed by friendly fire? Did they kill one of their own in order to muddy the tracks, just as Peter Gabriel muddied the tracks on Mount Desert Island by claiming it was an experience park? In other words, when the Jackson Labs lost $10 million, went up in a ball of flames, they weren't objects of arson. No, they were experience parks. When Shannon Harps was Ripper attacked by Peter Gabriel's establishment of equity for the Green Party, she wasn't murdered. No, she was experience parked. And when Sarah C. Kennedy was experience parked and died, she was not merely morally uplifted, but she was satisfying the Sybil's curse. And my condolences were full blessed by the frogmen, the Seattle and Pittsburgh Postal Union, who delivered it with that anonymous call where two more Kennedys could be found at the bottom of a lake. And these infra maniacs from Pepperland hold sway over all tomorrows because they conjured up the bellows of flame over Africa, just as they were promising when they were molesting little Jimmy. A lot of this happened because Seattle and Pittsburgh are driven crazy at the idea of legitimizing the dignities of another human being. Driven crazy. They throw themselves to the floor, rip at the carpet, dignify the legitimacy and dignity of another human being. It's beyond them. They can't comprehend it. It fills them with so much hate and fumes and steaming that they're sure they're right in all that they do.